What makes a movie a classic? There can be several different attributes. Sometimes it's the plot or story itself and how everyone involved makes the movie universe believable, from the writers to the actors. It can be a combination of a few different things: the story, the characters, and the special effects that make a film enjoyable. And sometimes it's the character themselves, how they evolve and grow into something more. Terminator 2 Judgment Day needs no introduction, and I think a lot of people would agree that they should have stopped the franchise at this film. That aside, one of the most memorable things about this film is how the T-800, or Uncle Bob as he's later called, is now protecting John Connor from another Terminator, and how he learns to become more human. How does all of this take place? This is why Uncle Bob is one of the best characters ever. Let's talk about his qualities as a father and guardian, what makes this movie special, his journey to humanity, and more. Let's first recap on what we know about Uncle Bob so far. I'll try to keep this as brief as possible, but feel free to skip ahead to avoid the recap. Be warned, you may miss some important details later on in the video. The T-800 arrives having been reprogrammed by John Connor to protect his younger self. He eventually tracks present-day John Connor, intercepting him from the T-1000 clutches at the Galleria, an advanced prototype Terminator who assumed the disguise of Officer Austin. The T-800 explains its purpose after momentarily stopping the T-1000 and escorts John to the outskirts of the city. After realizing his foster parents are dead, John realizes that one of the T-800's mission parameters is to obey his commands, which he then orders the Guardian Cyborg to accompany him to Pescadero State Hospital to free his mother, Sarah. Sarah distrusts the cyborg at first, thinking it was sent back to terminate her, but reluctantly sides with it as the T-1000 approaches the three. All three manage to escape and hide in an abandoned gas station as they stitch up both Sarah's and the T-800's wounds, while also switching the T-800 CPU to write instead of read only to become more human. The T-800 begins to display more human-like qualities as the trio journey through the desert and arrives at Sarah's friend Enrique's camp for supplies and is introduced as Uncle Bob. Because Sarah learned that Miles Dyson was directly responsible for Judgment Day, having reverse engineered a microprocessor from the original T-800 CPU that was found in the Cyberdyne factory, Uncle Bob and John pursue Sarah to stop her from killing Dyson, who realizes she would be no better than a machine if she went through with it. The trio informs Dyson of Judgment Day and the events to follow because of his work, and they convince him to help destroy the lab at Cyberdyne. The police attempt to intervene, but Uncle Bob keeps good on his promise of not killing anyone and escaping in a SWAT van, while Dyson sacrifices himself in the lab explosion. The three are again chased by the T-1000, resulting in a fight between the two machines in the steel mill. Although Uncle Bob lost his arm, was smashed repeatedly by heavy machinery, and had his power source destroyed by the T-1000, he was able to use heat sinks to power up his backup battery and intervene just in time with a grenade launcher, causing the T-1000 to fall and be destroyed in the molten steel. To prevent others from using his technology to create Skynet, Uncle Bob bid John and Sarah farewell as they lowered into the steel below. Let's take a look at how Uncle Bob became human. Upon his first arrival, it was very similar to its predecessor in 1984. Cold, direct, and physical, though only when forced to in what could be considered self-defense, as seen in the corral, compared to how aggressive the previous unit was. During the T-800's early interactions with John, it is still direct, but logical in how it communicates, and is not afraid to throw itself in harm's way to protect John. Although his CPU is still set to read only before going to Pescadero State Hospital, it displays a curiosity at John's request to avoid terminating everybody, and even promises to do so, which he does keep his word throughout the film from that point on. He easily disables the staff while saving Sarah. He manages to avoid any casualties with a minigun, and when trying to gather an escape vehicle for himself and the Connors, he shoots all of the officers non-lethally. To get Sarah Connor to trust it, Uncle Bob remarks on something Kyle Reese said to her in the 80s. "Come with me if you want to live." After escaping from Pescadero, Sarah and John learned that the T-800 has a learning computer that allows it to become more human-like the more time it spends around humans. In a deleted extended scene, we see John and Sarah accessing the CPU and arguing whether to destroy the T-800 or not. John ultimately convinces Sarah that they need it to fight the T-1000, protesting that he's my friend. This explains why the T-800 is more human-like throughout the rest of the film. A nice piece of symbolism is that when it first donned the biker gear, it wore a black undershirt. However, after the events of Pescadero, Uncle Bob sports a gray t-shirt, symbolizing that he is more human-like in intellect and represents safety compared to being a cold, black-hearted machine. John teaches the T-800 to look for a spare key in the visor in comparison to having to manually hotwire it, something he remembers to do and almost grins at the thought of when commandeering the SWAT van to escape Cyberdyne. Notice also in this scene that he makes a human expression when trying to hotwire the car as well. On the way to Cactus Jack's market, shout out Mick Foley, John teaches the T-800 lingo, including the famous line, "Hasta la vista, baby," that he uses in, well, you know which scene. In another deleted extended scene, John teaches the T-800 how to smile, who remarks that he should practice in front of a mirror. This creepy smile is a moment that happens several times in the future Terminator film, Terminator Genisys. When meeting Enrique, the T-800 is given the nickname Uncle Bob, and displays more signs of curiosity as he sees Paco, Enrique's son, and picks him up. Uncle Bob begins to be more human-like inside the armory, remarking excellent when picking out the grenade launcher and smirking when finding the minigun. When fixing the truck, John talks to Uncle Bob, venting again just like he did before they went to rescue Sarah from Pescadero. This time, Uncle Bob listens more intently and asks, "Why do you cry?" in a tone that is human-like for the first time, even asking a follow-up question to understand the concept of why humans cry. While Sarah observes this, she remarks that a machine is the closest to a father figure John's ever had, as we see him quickly learning to fake out John's high five and learning to give a thumbs up. As John figures out Sarah is going after Miles Dyson, Uncle Bob noticeably blinks. Let me also clarify why this is important. While there is a claim that the T-800 has not ever blinked throughout the film, Arnold has done so accidentally, such as confronting the cigar-smoking biker. However, this blinking seems intentional, as he also looks up to figure out what Sarah intends to change as if he's thinking, and remarks Dyson in an aha moment. During the raid on Cyberdyne, Uncle Bob begins to pop off one-liners to display his humanity, such as "I insist," "Let me try mine," remote control while imitating a clicking sound, the grin with the "Trust me," "Time to go, now," "Here, hold this," and of course the famous "I'll be back." Interestingly enough, when Sarah calls out that they are being pursued by a chopper, he says it's him, remarking the T-1000 as a human he instead of it. Near the end of the film, Uncle Bob displays more urgency in his voice. He commands John to take the off-ramp and urges him to go now after the T-1000 has reformed. One of my favorite quotes from the T-800 is when he remarks, "I need a vacation," showing his understanding of humor. Whether it's due to his mission parameters or his own free will, he refuses John's order to stay, as he knows it's possible that someone could reverse engineer his technology as they did with the first Terminator. Uncle Bob finally understands why humans cry, hugs John, and gives him a thumbs up, the gesture he learned while he was at Enrique's. The T-800's journey from cyborg to near human is one of the best aspects of the film, as it provides brilliant storytelling. One of the best examples of this is how Uncle Bob affects Sarah Connor. Sarah initially distrusts the machine, even wanting to destroy it in the deleted scene because of the hell she suffered when fighting one alongside Kyle Reese. However, because Uncle Bob not only goes to maintain his mission to protect John, but also becomes more of a father figure in the process, Sarah eventually goes on to trust and respect him, shaking his hand before he's lowered into the steel mill. Let's talk about the father figure and guardian-like qualities he possesses. In the first half of the film, before his CPU is switched, the T-800's primary mission is to protect John Connor. However, even in the first half, there are times when he takes up the guardian role. It instructs John to get down and reflexively holds onto him while the T-1000 shoots, and then opens the door to hide John while temporarily incapacitating the T-1000. The T-800 then manages to catch up to John, pulling him off the bike, and cleverly shoots out the tire of the truck that the T-1000 is driving, keeping John out of harm's way. When John contacts Janelle to make sure his foster parents are okay, he notices that Janelle is being nicer than usual. The T-800 lies about the dog's name, catching the T-1000 in a lie, and lets John know that it's not safe to return home. While John is making this phone call and also while listening to John talk about Sarah, notice that the T-800 is constantly scanning the area to make sure no danger is imminent. Because John realizes the machine has to do everything he says from that point on, he obeys his commands while still protecting John, subduing when necessary, helping Sarah Connor from the staff, and protecting the two from the T-1000. Needing no sleep, the T-800 stands guard all night while the Connors get what rest they can. Not realizing Enrique is an ally, the T-800 quickly draws his gun when Sarah does to protect her and John. In the armory, Uncle Bob even makes sure that John climbs down the ladder safely, both in a human-like and father-like manner. Before and after his learning computer is set from read to write, it's interesting that he listens to John intently, whether it's venting, him reminiscing about the past, or commanding him to chase Sarah down before she hurts Dyson. He has no reason to, yet he does so because he is curious and is also doing what a parental figure would do: listen to their child. As John and Uncle Bob arrive in time, the latter performs first aid to help Miles recover from the bullet wound while helping his family calm down. As I mentioned before when talking about his humanity, the raid on Cyberdyne is where we see more of Uncle Bob's protective qualities. He retrieves PPE for Miles and Sarah to wear, he pushes the police back while not harming them to buy the gang time to break into the vault, bursts through a wall to get Sarah out of danger, and clears a path so they can escape. Of course, when it comes to the T-1000 pursuing them, the T-800 does what he can to protect John and Sarah from harm, slamming the brakes to stop the helicopter, commandeering a truck and then shooting at the T-1000, and escorting John and Sarah away from it. It's his urging to split up by yelling, "Go, now!" that demonstrates his guardian and human-like qualities the most. It's like a father trying to protect his son from danger and telling him to go on so he can square off with the fellow machine alone. Even after losing an arm, being hit with heavy machinery, being stabbed, and running on a backup battery, Uncle Bob will stop at nothing until his mission is complete. This is what I believe to be a nice callback to Kyle Reese's quote, and it absolutely will not stop, ever. And of course, near the end where every grown man cries, Uncle Bob apologizes for having to go away, but knows he must be destroyed to prevent Skynet from coming back. He comforts John by wiping away his tears and hugs him for the first and only time. One of the most interesting comparisons to bring up that others have made is that although Sarah at times is becoming more inhuman, such as the music cue of the T-800's heartbeat when she attempts to shoot Dyson, and only hugging John initially to make sure he wasn't injured, the T-800 learns to become more human and at times is a better parental figure than Sarah. He hardly ever leaves John's side unless asked to. He's always protecting him from danger and is not afraid to throw himself in harm's way for John. As Sarah said in the film, of all the would-be fathers who came and went over the years, this machine, is the only one who measured up. Uncle Bob acting as a father to John is one of the key elements of why this movie is so special, which I'll dive into next. Let's talk about what makes Terminator 2 so special. The element of the T-800 being a protector is something that carried over in some shape or form in every film going forward. In Terminator 3: Rise of the Machines, the T-850 protects Kate Brewster and John Connor. In Salvation, Marcus Wright would eventually fight for the Resistance by assisting Kyle Reese and sacrificing his life for John Connor. There's Cameron in the Sarah Connor Chronicles. Pops is essentially an older Uncle Bob in Terminator Genesis, who has protected Sarah since she was a young girl. And of course, there's Carl and Grace in Terminator Dark Fate. I think this is why the franchise continues to persist, because they try to recapture the magic of T2, but have failed to do so. While the marketing did little to hide the twist of the T-800 being the good guy this time around, the aspect of a Terminator being reprogrammed to fight for the side of humanity and to protect instead of terminate this time around is what makes this film special. The fact that they had the T-800 also interact with John, becoming a father figure to him so to speak, while also learning to be more human compared to his predecessor, was a nice touch. As you can tell already, I've always been a fan of excellent writing, especially when it comes to twists in terms of redemption arcs. For example, Apollo Creed in Rocky III, and Johnny Lawrence in Chosen Taguchi in Cobra Kai. In terms of a machine being a father figure, the only one that got somewhat close I feel is Terminator Genesis, as we see this relationship on a different level where Pops actually stayed in Sarah's life from childhood. This dynamic is different in a good way, as from what I remember seeing in the film, which forgive me, it has been a while, it didn't try to completely rehash what was done with John and Uncle Bob. I think because the relationship between the two is so prominent is why the film has a heart past all the science fiction and violence. Another incredible aspect of the film is the special effects. The T-1000 scenes still hold up to this day, and considering this movie was made 3 decades ago, that's saying something. 36 artists worked on the effects, which cost $5.5 million at the time, almost $12.3 million today, all for only 3 minutes total of screen time. Just the way the machine moves in and out and is uniquely different from the T-800 is astonishing. All of that being said, we have to give credit to Arnold, Linda, Edward, and Robert for carrying this film. I've spoken a bit about Arnold's portrayal already, but the performances are so excellent that it makes the movie believable. The 180 of Sarah's portrayal compared to the first film is a nice touch. She has become machine-like, a hardened soldier like her love Kyle Reese, and detaching herself from humanity so she can make sure that John becomes the leader he needs to be. John, someone we've heard so much about in the first film, is finally seen in this movie. Although he's a delinquent with a rough upbringing, he shows maturity at times when realizing that everything his mother told him was true, and when he's meeting the T-800 for the first time. You can see the great military leader that Cal and Sarah have talked about, and at times you also realize he's just a kid, notably when talking about his father out in the desert to Uncle Bob. Last but not least, we can't forget the T-1000. Robert Patrick destroyed this role. The mimicry of a bald eagle as the T-1000 while scanning and focused on his target, the physical regimen that allowed him to run at incredible speeds, and just the cold delivery of his lines, especially "Call to John now." Despite being much smaller than Arnold, the T-1000 still comes off as an advanced prototype and shows that the T-800 will have his hands full fighting it. Perhaps if there's enough interest, I could talk about these characters' Terminator 2 arcs, but these people carried the movie. Here are my final thoughts on Uncle Bob and Terminator 2 in general. This film is a timeless classic because of the themes, the development of Uncle Bob, and the performances. I felt that Terminator 2 would have been a perfect send-off for the franchise, and it's a shame they haven't been able to recapture the magic of this film. Understandably, the first film pales in comparison, as it was technically more of a sci-fi slasher. However, because of its foundation, Terminator 2 Judgment Day was able to mean so much more and brought interest back to the franchise. Many consider the film to be one of the best science fiction, action, and sequels ever made. This film is sentimental to me as it was one of the first films I ever saw as a 5-year-old kid. I know, not appropriate, but still. And it's simply a film I can rewatch over and over and not get bored. The portrayal of T-800 is memorable. Despite being a machine who was created by Skynet to combat the human resistance, he was reprogrammed to fight for humanity and grasp the value of human life, sacrificing himself to make sure humanity would survive. While I'd highly doubt that anyone would watch this video without watching the movie, if you have not for any reason, you need to see it, or give it a fresh watch. It's a movie worth revisiting over and over. Make a yearly habit of seeing it once, it's that good. Terminator 2 paved the way for a lot of science fiction films today, and with memorable characters like Uncle Bob, it's easy to see why. If a machine can learn the value of human life, maybe we can too. Let me know what you guys think down below. What's your favorite part about Terminator 2? If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like it, subscribe, share it with your friends, and comment, as these all help my channel grow. Be sure to check out and subscribe to my gaming channel. I've got some new clips from Street Fighter 6, and I'll be uploading more clips in between editing the videos on my main channel. Supporting the gaming channel helps me support this channel, and my goal is to reach 1,000 subscribers, so any help and support are appreciated. Keep up with me on social media via Instagram. Thanks for watching, stay beautiful, stay awesome, and we'll catch you around next time.